Mark Twain Speaks. Kindly listen as Mark Twain performer Don McNeil brings the wit and wisdom of America's favorite humorist to life. Everyone is welcome, and cigar smoking is encouraged.
I've been told I shouldn't drink whiskey before I do these, but sometimes the temptation to have whiskey is just too much for me. That was the case today. I talked last time about my mom, Jane. And if you'll indulge me, I'll do that again today. I'm going to talk about the time I very nearly broke my mother's heart. It was the time at around age 5, I first told my mom I was not a Christian. And her reaction was predictable. But I'm getting ahead of myself. When I was 4.5, 5 years old, in that range, I started school. I had a teacher. She was a woman from New England, middle age, with New England ways and principles. And she always opened school with prayer and a chapter from the New Testament. Also, she explained the chapter with a brief talk. In one of those talks, she dwelt upon the text, "Ask, and ye shall receive," and said that whosoever prayed for a thing with earnestness and strong desire need not doubt that his prayer would be answered. Well, I was so forcibly struck by this information and so gratified by the opportunities which it offered that this was probably the first time I had heard of it. I thought I would give it a trial. I believed in my teacher thoroughly, and I had no doubts as to the result. I prayed for gingerbread. Margaret Kuhnman was the baker's daughter. She brought a slab of gingerbread to school every morning. She had always kept it out of sight before, but when I finished my prayer and glanced up, there it was, and in easy reach, and she was looking the other way. In all my life, I believe I never enjoyed an answer to a prayer more than I enjoyed that one. And I was a convert, too. I had no end of wants, and they had always remained unsatisfied up to that time. But I meant to supply them and extend them now that I had found out how to do it. But this dream was like almost all the other dreams we indulge in life. There was nothing in it. I did as much praying before the next 2 or 3 days as anyone in my town, I suppose. And I was very sincere and earnest about it, too. But nothing came of it. I found that not even the most powerful prayer was competent to lift that gingerbread again. And I came to the conclusion that if a person remains faithful to his gingerbread and keeps his eye on it, he need not trouble himself about your prayers. Something about my conduct and bearing troubled my mother, and she took me aside and questioned me concerning it with much solicitude. I was reluctant to reveal to her the change that had come over me recently, for I knew it would grieve her and distress her kind heart. But at last, I confessed with many tears that I had ceased to be a Christian. She was heartbroken and asked me why. I said it was because I had found out that I was a Christian for revenue alone, and I could not bear the thought of it It was so ignoble. I'm not sure if I use the word ignoble at age 5, but you'll allow me that change now that I'm near the age of 70. She gathered me to her breast and comforted me. And from what she said, I knew if I could continue in that condition, I would never be lonesome. My mother had a good deal of trouble with me, but I think she enjoyed it. She had none at all with my brother Henry, who was 2 years younger than I, and I think that the unbroken monotony of his goodness and truthfulness and obedience would have been a burden to her but for the relief and variety which I furnished in the other direction. My misbehaving was a tonic to my mother. I was valuable to her. I never thought of it before, but now I see it. I never knew Henry to do a vicious thing toward me or toward anyone else, but he frequently did righteous things that cost me as heavily. It was his duty to report on me when I needed reporting and neglected to do it myself. And he was very faithful in discharging that duty. My brother Henry is the character Sid in Tom Sawyer, but Sid was not Henry. Henry was a very much finer and better boy than ever Sid was. After all, it was Henry who called my mother's attention to the fact that the thread with which she had sewed my collar together to keep me from going in swimming had changed color. My mother would not have discovered it but for that, and she was manifestly piqued when she recognized that that prominent piece of circumstantial evidence had escaped her sharp eye. We generally visit our shortcomings on somebody else when there is a possible excuse for it, but no matter. I took it out on Henry. There is always compensation for such as are unjustly used. I often took it out on him, sometimes as an advance payment for something which I hadn't yet done. There were occasions when the opportunity was too strong a temptation, and I had to draw on the future. I did not need to copy that idea from my mother, and I probably didn't. It is most likely that I invented it for myself. Still, she wrought upon that principle upon occasion. If the incident of the broken sugar bowl is in Tom Sawyer, I don't remember whether it is or not. That is an example of it. Henry never stole sugar. He took it openly from the bowl. His mother knew that he wouldn't take sugar when she wasn't looking, but she always had her doubts about me. Not exactly doubts either. She knew very well I would take sugar when her head was turned. One day when she was not present, Henry took sugar from her prized and precious old English sugar bowl, which was an heirloom in the family, and he managed to break the bowl. It was the first time I had ever had a chance to tell anything on him, and I was inexpressibly glad. I told him I was going to tell on him, but he was not disturbed. When my mother came in and saw the bowl lying on the floor in fragments, she was speechless for a minute. I allowed that silence to work. I judged it would increase the effect. I was waiting for my mother to say, "Who did that?" so that I could fetch out my news and tell on Henry. But it was an error of miscalculation. When she got through with her silence, she didn't ask about it. She merely gave me a crack on the skull with her thimble that I felt all the way down to my heels. Then I broke out with my injured innocence, expecting to make her feel sorry that she had punished the wrong child. I expected her to go do something remorseful and pathetic. I told her I was not the one. It was Henry. But there was no upheaval. She said without emotion, "It's all right. It isn't any matter. You deserve it for something that you are going to do that I shan't hear about." And just think of it, all the trouble I went through for my mother to be a bad boy. And in the end, Henry always got the credit. Oh, well. That's the end of talking about my mother for today. I'll have more stories about her. She lived to be around age 88. And I will always think that it was my misbehavior that gave her a reason to stay active and lively. That's all for today.